Hello everyone, my name is Alessandro Ruggera. I'm the director of the Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Toronto, and I'm very happy to present and to introduce today the last of a series of 4 webinars, 4 conversations on a changing world. We have chosen 4 keywords to try to map somehow what is going on and what are the changes that has been inducted by the pandemic recently. I don't want to spend much time speaking about the pandemic. I mean, you know, but this has been the reason why we have decided, and when I say we, I mean the Istituto Italiano di Cultura and the 2 outstanding curators that helped the Istituto to put together this series. One of them is Francesca Molteni in Milan that curated 2 of the previous 3 conversations, and the other one is Sascha Hastings, who is a curator based in Toronto. And the Institute has been lucky enough to work with Sascha for several events in the past, mostly related to architecture and design, but not only. And with Francesca Molteni and Sascha Hastings, we have decided to choose 4 keywords. As you know, if you have followed the previous webinars: body, breath, and this is the last one is void we had last time, and care. So as you can imagine, care is the theme, the keyword that we kept for the last webinar, for the last conversation, and I wouldn't want to say is one of the most compelling and attractive, but for sure is a word that has become even more dense, I would say, and relevant during the recent events and during the pandemic, of course. Not only, I don't think it's unrelated. It just made it more urgent somehow. The idea of taking care of the others is probably at the very core of our ability and possibility of living together. There is no society without the idea of somehow taking responsibility and for the life of the others and for what is happening to the society in general and for our fellow humans that lives with us and beside us. So I really think we needed to see how, also for us personally, as people who are working in the cultural field, organizing and reflecting and offering cultural events, but also art and so on. How is it for us, and how can we take care of others? How can we, having responsibility of taking care of other people around us and what is going on in the society? So I hope the conversation of today that involves two persons that we have chosen because they have really worked on this idea of taking care in their professional practice. One is Simone Sliso. Simone Sliso is an architect that has extensively worked with his office that is called TAMassociati in working on taking care, and taking care has become somehow the key word of their practice. And Gaëtane Verna, who is the director of one of the most relevant cultural institutions in Toronto, the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery. I'm sure the conversation will be led by Sascha, and I'm sure it will be intriguing. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope it will give us some answer. I would just like now to introduce Sascha, who has been a producer for CBC, for Radio Radio Canada, for several different programs, and most recently has been working as a curator, curating exhibitions at the Venice Biennale, the Canada Pavilion, and in particular the Architecture Biennale a couple of years ago. The Evidence Room is an extremely strong exhibition that was dealing with Holocaust and in a very touching and strong way. With the Istituto, Sascha curated an exhibition on the 40 years of the Rome program of the Waterloo University, architecture. And here she is now with us, and I leave the floor to her for introducing the panelists and leading the conversation. I also would like to remind that you can be part of the conversation, and I invite you to do so by using the Q&A button that you have at the bottom of your screen. So I hope you will enjoy the conversation. And Sascha, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. And thanks also to Francesca Molteni, my co-curator in Milan. And welcome to Gaëtane Verna in Toronto and Simone Sliso in Venice. And of course, a big welcome to you, the audience. If you've been with us for the last 3 weeks, you know the format of the webinar. I'll say a few words about the theme, care, and then introduce Gaëtane and Simone. Then each of them will give a short presentation, after which I'll lead a discussion that will include some questions from the audience, and you can ask those through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. As Alessandro said, in the last weeks, we've talked about the themes of void, body, and breath, and now we move to our final conversation on care. In some ways, it's a culmination of the others. It's now been almost 10 months since the first news started circulating about a virulent new coronavirus that was causing pneumonia-like symptoms and death in apparently otherwise healthy people in Wuhan, China, and that subsequently spread to Italy, through Europe, and around the world. By mid-March, a good part of the world was in partial or full lockdown, and the world economy had ground to a halt. We had a bit of a respite from the disease over the summer when a lot of life moved outside. COVID, which appears to be primarily spread by airborne transmission, retreated briefly. Now it's emphatically on the upswing again. Here in Canada, daily case numbers are back where they were during the height of last spring's lockdown, and daily numbers in Italy are also close to all-time highs. Mercifully, death rates are still lower than they were, partly because we have more knowledge and experience dealing with the virus, and partly because more of the afflicted are in a generally younger and healthier cohort than last spring. But as we know, it's only mid-October, life is moving indoors again where the transmission risk is much higher, and in Canada at least, we have about 6 months of winter ahead of us. Meanwhile, the world economy has never been this fragile in living memory. We've all seen the empty storefronts. Businesses are going bust at record rates, and more will follow. Social, racial, and political tensions are rising. A safe and effective vaccine or a treatment, while closer than 6 months ago, still elude us. People who believed they were safe and secure now find themselves in situations of unprecedented uncertainty. People who were already marginalized or living precariously are now at high risk of being left behind completely. The knock-on effects will likely be huge in terms of employment, personal and familial relationships, social cohesion, politics, and mental health. So in this context, how do we take care of ourselves? Perhaps more importantly, how do we take care of each other? What does care even mean? And can art and architecture play a meaningful role in this? To talk more about this, I'm joined by Gaëtane Verna and Simone Sliso. Gaëtane Verna is the director of the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery in Toronto. Before that, she was executive director and chief curator of the Musée d'Art de Joliette and curator of the Foreman Art Gallery at Bishop's University, Sherbrooke, where she also taught in the art history department. She holds an international diploma in heritage administration and conservation from the Institut National du Patrimoine in Paris, and received a DEA and a master's degree in art history from the Sorbonne. Gaëtane has years of experience in arts administration, catalog publishing, and curating exhibitions by emerging, mid-career, and established Canadian and international artists. In 2017, she was appointed Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres by the Cultural Service of the Embassy of France in Canada for her significant contribution to furthering the arts in France and throughout the world. She's the president of the board of directors of the Toronto Arts Council and just recently joined the board of directors of the Canada Council for the Arts. Simone Sliso is co-principal and co-founder of TAMassociati an Italian team of architects, engineers, and researchers that creates high quality, sustainable, and socially equitable architecture at an affordable price. The firm's motto is taking care in architecture. TAM has won widespread international recognition, including the Aga Khan Award for Architecture for the Salam Center for Cardiac Surgery in Sudan, the International Kapokien G. Youst Gold Medal for the world's most sustainable pediatric hospital in Port Sudan, and the Zumtobel Group Award for Innovation and Sustainability. In 2014, TAM was named Italian Architect of the Year, and in 2016, they curated the Italian Pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennale. Simone studied at the University of Architecture of Venice, UAV, where he also taught. He's a visiting professor and member of the Cluster for Sustainable Cities at the Portsmouth School of Architecture, adjunct professor at the University of Padua, and visiting professor at ENSTP Yaoundé, Cameroon. In 2019, Simone was appointed Italian Design Ambassador by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Currently, Simone and TAMassociati are working in Rwanda, Uganda, Cameroon, Kenya, Senegal, and other countries in the global south, as well as in Italy. Simone Sliso and Gaëtane Verna, welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hi, there you are, Simone. And
Thank you very much for your kind presentation.
Well, it's lovely to see you both. You've both prepared short presentations, and Gaëtane, I wonder if we could start with you. Can you just give us a little bit of context on what we're going to see, and then share it with us?
Yes. So thank you so much, Alessandro, and thank you, Sascha, for the introduction and the invitation to reflect on this idea of care that is really close to my daily preoccupations as a director and artistic director of a non-collecting museum. And the Power Plant has long had the mandate of presenting the work of Canadian and international artists in Toronto. In the last 8 years, our perspective has been one that positioned the Power Plant as very much the world in one place. The notion of place is one that we have chosen to present as a fluid concept that is weaved through the choices of artists to work with and the themes and questions that their distinct work raise. At a gallery like ours, we work as curators. And the definition that I often refer to in order to continuously focus all of our actions. A curator is a keeper or custodian of a museum or other collections. The etymology of the word also indicates our attention to the notion of care that is the main theme of our talk today, curare, to watch over, to attend. As Sascha has mentioned, over the last few months and last few weeks, I have, like many of us in the field of museum and visual arts, read the countless demands on museums in Canada, in the US, and in parts of the world. And the many art institutions have been faced with calls to address and recognize their racist histories as well as their sexist positions. And they've been called to adopt practices of equity, and they've been asked and forced them to review all of their policies and evaluate their role within the communities that they serve. From diversifying collections, policies, and exhibitions, diversifying their hiring policies and their board composition, everything is now in the open, and people demand change. An in-depth review of core values in order to work towards a better shared future. All of these actions must be established within the scope of remaining institutional ethos, going beyond rhetoric. At this point in time, not to mention that it has always been the case, but now more than ever, diversity is a fact. But integration is an action that must be set forth in a continuous motion and within tangible, verifiable, and measurable impacts on the museum. I call this a true progress. The question is, can these demands be linked to the need for museum to effectively take care or not only the objects that are custodians of, but objects that they have in their care, but also the people that they work with, and the institution at all levels of the organization, as well as the communities that they serve. All of these elements must be part of our thinking of this notion of caring within an institution. With this notion of service and care, we're asked to also review the exhibitions, educational programs that are presented in order to address key issues of our time, such as social justice and equity. To some, this might not be the role of an art gallery or a museum, but I want to use an example of a summer 2019 exhibition held at the Power Plant to illustrate one of the many strategies that we have developed in order to serve our community and instill within the organization the notion of care as a core value of all of our programs, as a metaphor for urgency of creating space of dialogue and exchange. As a majority of institutions posted messages of support to Black Lives Matter movement, communities criticize them and are holding them accountable for the changes that are necessary. Our galleries must be meaningful to all visitors. We must be the bridge between the voices of artists and the many diverse publics of our community. Our goal is to affect change, inspire viewers, and impact their lives as citizens outside of the walls of the gallery. In order to do so, we have extended and expanded our education and outreach initiative beyond the scope of our family or school programs. We have established programs with underserved communities in and out of the galleries, such as master classes with exhibiting artists and artists that are members of the Power Plants community. We're taking part in a nationwide initiative called fieldtrip.art, a new online platform to deliver experiences with artists of all levels, artists working across mediums in all areas of the country, together with virtual residencies. We've organized conversation between fiction authors and exhibiting artists, organizing continuous series of workshops with Toronto-based writers collectives, developing an accessibility-focused program titled Expanding Access in order to address the fact that some visitors have been excluded from art galleries and museums because of limited to no accessibility options or inclusivity practices. The initiatives are as simple as increased American Sign Language for our talks, systematically providing audio description tours of our exhibition for visitors that are blind or who have low vision. These recorded tours offers detailed descriptions of artwork. They help people form mental images of the work that they may not see clearly. The recordings are available on SoundCloud and are created by gallery staff in consultation with specialists of the field. We've also set up an Emerging Artist Network, a one-year gallery-led mentorship initiative that will see the gallery team interact with 25 local artists and steward them on all aspects of their work, their aspiration, their chosen career. In engaging with them, our goal is to diversify the voices within the community and thus expand the very fabric of the Toronto arts community. Some long-time running programs, such as our Sunday Scene, that always had the role of inviting speakers from the art world and other disciplines to offer the responses to the current exhibition, are offered as a space where the speakers are free to discuss, criticize the work presented at the gallery. By expanding and diversifying the voices invited to contribute, we see a direct impact on who attends these talks and the types of exchanges that are taking place. By doing this, the gallery exposes itself to harsh criticism, but we do this in order to fully engage with the community and never shy away from their opinion and thoughts on our work. As our gallery, our main point of contact with visitors is through our exhibitions. We have expanded the scope of artists, their provenance, their cultural identity, and the type of works that they presented. To think that it took us 30 years to present the work of a Senegalese painter, Omar Ba, at the Power Plant. The exhibition traveled to Montreal and is now in Calgary. On all accounts, the public is constantly mentioning how they came to see one exhibition, but have left the museum having for the first time encountered the word of Omar Ba. This is a comment that we have repeatedly heard every season. The choices are seen as a risk-taking, but in the end, the public always answers positively. They are eager to engage with other narratives. Thus, it becomes our responsibility to have the courage to deliver these new voices to our audiences. In summer 2019, the exhibition of artist Mario Pfeiffer is a perfect example of how artists expand the conversation well before the general public, as well as the mainstream catches up with the reality of the world in which we live in. In the context of his exhibition, Pfeiffer presented 3 works: Black Activists, 2015, Approximation in the Digital Age of the Humanity Condemned to Disappear, a 2014 work, and again, a 2018 work. Within the scope of these 3 videos, he addresses the music of the rap group Flatbush Zombie, together with images critical of gun violence, police brutality against Black people in America, as well as surreal narrative on DIY 3D printed handguns. He then moves to the plight of the Yagan people in Tierra del Fuego, Chile, an indigenous community forced to abandon or adapt their tradition as a result of settler, anthropologists, tourists, and global capitalism and exploitation of natural resources. Lastly, his most recent work, again, confronts attitudes to immigration and justice in his home country of Germany. The work restages and reenacts the sequences of events that brought about the tragic death of Shabazz Saleh al-Aziz, a Kurdish Iraqi refugee in Germany who was tied up to a tree by 4 local men following what they perceived as a violent behavior in a supermarket. Pfeiffer uses reconstruction and public response to bring to light xenophobia and racial division and deep-seated prejudice within German society and in the world. By presenting these works at the Power Plant, our goal was to push our visitors, our Toronto citizens, to see the works, explore their own behavior, to question their own reaction to the situation embedded within the artist's works. With the title, "If you end up with the story you started with, then you're not listening along the way," Pfeiffer compels us to think of our behavior. In closing, I would like to share my screen and show you excerpt of the 3 works that I previously mentioned. Thank you.
On activists, a whole sheet of LSD, but that ain't for the mattress. Action, bitch, my stroke is immaculate. I send an insane, I'm flashy as an acid trip. Just me and a rusty burner. Shout out to Smurda, shout out to Rowdy. My mind is cloudy, stay with iron around me like Robert Downey. Don't you doubt me, king like LeBron. Watch me switch my mouthpiece. Running through knots, couple carrots in my mouth like what's up, doc? I be talking to my 9 like what's up, Glock? I flirt with death, the drugs high in my paranoia. But this what the acid taught us. You got a better chance, you wanna lapse the perennial waters. Hide your daughters, join your cult, let's have an orgy.
Ich habe mit seiner Familie telefoniert. Zu diesem Zeitpunkt ist Shabazz tot. Er heißt Shabazz Saleh al-Aziz und wurde 1995 in Suleimania im Irak geboren.
Ihre Bonuspunkte. Do you speak German? Your bonus points here.
Was wollen Sie von mir?
Wissen Sie, was ich von Ihnen will?
Stell die Flasche hin, nimm dein Telefon und geh.
Zivilcourage.
Okay, Gaëtane, thank you very, very much for that presentation. That was wonderful. I remember the exhibition well, and also the Omar Ba exhibition you mentioned. Really terrific, and there's lots there that we'll come back to in a few minutes. I'd like to turn to Simone now. Simone, you've also prepared a short presentation. Could you please share it with us now?
Okay, yes, sure. In the last 15 years, TAMassociati has worked mainly on the boundaries of human settlements, physical boundaries, but at the same time, social boundaries. I refer to boundaries between inclusion and exclusion. This condition has allowed us to observe human settlements from a peripheral point of view. We considered this condition as an opportunity because sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to focus on an object or a phenomenon. On the boundaries, we have tried to realize projects conceived as commons, considering that in the popular sense of a common good is a specific resource shared by all the members of a given community. So we have considered the boundaries as land of possible encounters, rather than the limits of exclusion. We have tried to move this line a bit further beyond the horizon, turn the exclusion and sustainable development of human settlements to be considered common good as a whole and taking care of places and communities. Taking care has become the key word of our firm. It gives us a vision of architecture in the service of community. It seeks to show how architecture makes the difference when it takes care of individuals and communities, spaces and places, principles and resources. Architecture concentrated on society can curb marginalization and exclusion and become a driving force for new visions, a powerful medium for communicating, an instrument through which many boundaries can claim rights, progress, opportunity, and inclusion. I want to share with you the words of a statement, part of a statement of the Philippines pavilion in 2019, the Art Biennale in Venice. The curator was Tessa Maria Guazzon. And I want to share it with you because I think this statement is at the same time incredibly outdated, but at the same time incredibly actual. Tessa Maria Guazzon says, actually we are buoyed by the seeming dissolutions of borders, the unprecedented speed of time and the mobility across places never before experienced. Yet we relentlessly face the threats of displacement, discrimination, and disasters. Nature is our great leveler. Emergence, this atmosphere of shared vulnerability. This is our Italian pavilion in 2016. It was entitled Taking Care. With this statement and with this work, we tried to offer a tangible proof of how architecture, with its specific tools, can help us spread and make effective the principles of sociality, participation, healthcare, integration, and legality, everywhere and at any scale. By embodying these principles, architecture in this millennium will increasingly have to engage with and find answers to the challenges that the city and environment present not only to architects, but all to the most responsible designers of the near future. Our work stems from a specific idea of architecture as a collective task, a collective effort in which we have involved other approaches, particularly attentive to places, communities, and local resources. The architecture that I'm showing in the slides was born from these approaches, often working with limited resources, but rich of ideals. And it has grown through constant exchanges with other practices in a process of construction of meaning, which seeks to establish common categories such as belonging, identity, sharing, and understanding. This idea of architecture does not promise new theory. Rather, it is constructed as a complex practice conducted through cooperation with numerous social cultural organizations active in border areas. In this complex and often disaggregated setting, architecture has to reconstruct its own role as a common understanding appropriately disseminated and shared, capable of carrying the places and developing human capital in every community. The boundary is in fact not just a physical space, it is also a mental space, namely the cultural margins in which the essential idea of housing is to be found. Architecture will continue to act as an instrument of resistance only if it will be able to cope with a marginalization and build new context in which this part of society identifies itself and can organize the rules by which it lives. It will have to deal with many challenges, but participatory architecture and design, intelligent, creative and effective, caring and responsible, will certainly succeed in undermining the status quo, conceiving the building better places. And since in architecture politics become places, design is also a powerful reminder of the responsibilities and potential of politics in everyone's life. An architectural construct, fixed or mobile, temporary or permanent, can become a political subject that defends and affirms people's rights. Significantly, architecture, together with the legal and socio-economic disciplines, is also playing a leading role in the current debate on common goods. Architecture, by definition, is an agent in the processes of manipulation and transformation of goods, whether private, public, or common. But it also participates increasingly in the process of affirmation of values such as identity, awareness, appropriation. Values involved in any process of construction and management of spaces and goods. And all the more so then they take on the character of a common good. Our thesis is that the process itself constitutes a common good, capable of generating new knowledge, a sharing of resources, a spread of democracy and greater comity. It is the task of architecture to gather the best energies to meet this challenge without withdrawing into their own specialist universe remote from the society which it claims to serve. The need to reconsider architecture is more generally design as a collective work capable of taking care of common goods at the service of the community emerges strongly. The process of generating and implementing an inclusive project must therefore be structured in such a way as to involve designers, institutions, and users in the construction of a common goods capable of transcending the mere utility of the aesthetics of architectural object. The research of beauty and empathy with the physical and social context constitutes the true foundation of design, in balance between environmental impact, resources, ambitions, and respect for local cultures. I want to conclude mentioning what Serge Chermayeff and Christopher Alexander wrote in 1963. Maybe the day is not far off when planners, designers, developers, promoters, and other professionals recognize the mere fact that the space between buildings is just as important for life of the urbanity as the buildings, and then they act consequently. The spaces between, we think, are not only the physical spaces, but also the intangible spaces of inclusion, sharing right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Simone. That was really wonderful. I think this idea that TAMassociati has of architecture that cares for the common good is an incredibly important and potent idea in the world today. So now, if we can, Gaëtane, if we can turn your video on again and your audio. There you are. We have about, looks like we have just over 20 minutes for a conversation. Hopefully we'll be able to extend that a little bit. A reminder to our audience, if you do have questions for Gaëtane or Simone, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to at least one or two of them at the end of the conversation. And Gaëtane and Simone, if you'd like to respond to something that the other one just said, please feel free to just jump in. So Gaëtane, I'd like to start with you. When COVID hit last spring and lockdowns came into force, which of course meant the power plant had to close down, and the important work that you're doing in caring for the community, for the artists, for the people, for your colleagues, when all that sort of went on hold, what went through your head, both as an individual and as the director of a leading contemporary art gallery in a big and diverse Canadian city?
I mean, selfishly, and and I want to be honest, I just thought of the exhibitions having to be closed, or all of the I mean I thought of everybody's health first. But I must say that, as when you lead an organization, you're always thinking, oh my God, what am I doing for my staff? What am I doing for the artists, their works that are traveling the world in between exhibition? So these were some of the key questions that we felt we needed to answer. And I must say that, we've been very lucky, and kind of in our, one could see my first reaction as a first world kind of reaction, artworks, artists, and staff, but that's the nature of the people that surround me and for whom I need to care, right? So so those were my first things. And then, I must say that as the Canadian, thinking of how do we balance budget, how do we, we're closing, what do we do with staff whose work is directly impacted by the fact that visitors cannot come into the gallery? Do we keep them on? So we did keep them on for a while until the new program from the federal government was put in place. And I must say that as a director, it made me feel comfortable to know that my staff, my part-time staff, were taken care of by the government, and that we had a government that believed that, we should give them a minimum revenue so that they could survive during the months that we were closed. And for us, it was up until, technically up until September.
Right, yeah. And Simone, in your case, when COVID hit, Italy had a very, very hard and quick lockdown. But I was curious because, you working with TAMassociati so much in the global South, which I would say is probably much more used to experiences of, let's say, infectious disease, pandemics, general deprivation and difficulty than we are in Canada. When COVID hit, given your experience already in the global South, what went through your mind?
Well, what is important for me to say about this is that now, as I told you, we are in this condition of shared vulnerability. And in our world, in the north part of the world, we didn't expect to live in this condition of fragility. And but this is part of the everyday's life of the weak populations of many countries of the south of the world. And so sharing experience is maybe the important part, fact of this crisis. I don't want to say, I hate those who say a crisis is an opportunity. I think a crisis is a crisis. But you have always to learn something from a crisis. And now we have learned that we are living in the same world, and we have to be responsible in having a common vision of the future. In my work as an architect, I can say that architecture is always a social art and is always a political act as well. And so our responsibility as professionals and intellectuals is to act the necessary fair and inclusive change at the service of places and communities as well.
Yeah, I think this experience of shared vulnerability is something that maybe a lot of us haven't felt before, and it's something that I hope continues to inform our sense of care and the urgency of it. But one thing I'm slightly concerned about, and Gaëtane, I'll start with you about this, is that, you know, I think of art as often as a place of, among many things, as a place of unexpected encounters with people and ideas outside of our everyday experience. And therefore it can help increase our capacity for empathy and care. You know, the examples you showed of from Mario Pfeiffer's videos, the stories he brought to light of an Iraqi immigrant in Germany, a vanishing indigenous community in Chile, the situation of Black Americans. But I'm a little concerned because COVID now, you know, 9-10 months into it, has so completely taken over the popular imagination or the collective imagination as the issue that must be solved. I'm wondering if some of the issues raised by artists like Mario Pfeiffer and the urgency of them are going to be considered in some ways by a lot of people just for now lower priority, and that therefore people who were already marginalized or living precariously might be left even further behind. How do you see this, and how do you see addressing it?
Well, I would say that I would say to the contrary, when we see, you know, you know, when one tries to analyze why the death or the murder of George Floyd had such an impact on people, or at least people in the Western world, but globally, because it became a global phenomenon, I think it's because everybody was in COVID and everybody was at home and everybody was looking and everybody was listening, because we weren't able to be functioning in the same rhythm that was customary to all of us, or at least, you know, the Western world that lives their life. But I don't want to make a generalization of it, but I think everybody was looking. And what really is interesting to me is that it has galvanized the call for, you know, social justice, equity within museums. And when you see that, you know, very wealthy board members who of prominent, you know, museums are forced to step down because the public, the artists, the staff of museums are asking for change. Or when people, you know, criticize the institution, whether it's on Instagram, talking about microaggression, repeated inequities within the art world, I think we have seen a shift, and everybody is, what will be interesting is what happens once we go back to normal. What is the new normal? And what happens when we can all travel again and go to Venice and, you know, freeze and engage in our past lifestyle? Will people, you know, still hold institution accountable to this? I mean, I can only speak of what I see here in Toronto in some of our larger institutions. I think people are listening and are looking. And the last thing I'd like to say, interestingly enough, whether, you know, a museum is a non-for-profit, private entity, to see how the public and the staff have stepped up to, you know, to speak against all of these, you know, inequities within the institution without seemingly being afraid of repercussions. Everybody's like calling it for what it is, calling race, you know, like saying the word and asking institution to be accountable in what I've rarely seen. And I would say in the Black community specifically, seeing our curators grouping together from Black curators all over the world, getting together, creating a kind of chat forum where people are exchanging information and readily addressing the systemic racism of our society. Every institution, you know, creating position of equity and diversity. To me, it's as if white people never thought that these were things that were necessary, you know, and suddenly, because of the situation in which we live in, because Black Lives Matter did not start with George Floyd, you know, they had been voicing those things, but suddenly this comes to the surface and people are seemingly listening. The question is for how long? And when we go normal, would these questions still be key issues? And the last thing I'd like to say, when one walks around Toronto and we look at our parks that have tents all over them because homelessness suddenly comes to the surface, this, you know, this is showing and saying what community organizers have been saying in the case of Toronto, that we need community housing. We need access to housing for people. So these questions are now in front of everybody's eyes, and nobody can say that they don't see it, because as we walk the street of Toronto, they're no longer based on parks.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of one of the characters in the video. Is it again? I'm not sure which one, but one of the characters in the Mario Pfeiffer video says, "What is it that I want from you? Civil courage."
Mm-hmm.
And that just, you know, kind of in the context of what you're saying, just gives me goosebumps, you know, because civil courage maybe now is being shown. And yes, the question is, will it last? And so Simone, you know, also the question that you were raising, Gaëtane, of when things go back to normal. Simone, when you hear the phrase, or when people say, "Oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal," what do you think?
Well, we can't go back to normal because it wasn't normal. It is a nonsense. We don't have to go back. We have to go forward. The world needs to have a big change to move towards an ethical and an ecological approach. And what is happening now, it's in a way, it's also, in my point of view, also a growing awareness about the ethical approach. It's proving more and more to me that we have to go in another direction. And the ethical approach is to get away from a marketing approach, from a market approach.
Well, one thing that I think you both share in common, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that you both share this idea that culture, and specifically stories and narratives, like people's community stories and narratives, play a central role in acts of care, in telling these stories and hearing these stories and letting people express them. Gaëtane, how do you see the relationship between culture, stories, and care?
Well, I think that, you know, when I curate an exhibition or choose an exhibition, I always start with the work and with like kind of, you know, there's works you show that make you think and make you think of your own position in this world, or what have I, is my work making a real difference? And especially, as a museum director, and if we see art as, kind of, let's say, part of the higher level goods and services of the happy few, if we do see them, I don't see it like this, which is why, like, I'm so happy that our gallery is free of charge, right? So there's no barriers to everyone engaging with the voices of the artists. And as contemporary art becomes more and more commodified, we could ask ourselves the question, are we really reaching the people that we aim to speak to through the works of the artists? And that's why I believe that the role of a museum curator, over and beyond our own, like, I curated this, we haven't, when I show the work of an artist, I haven't discovered anything. The artist is very much his own or her own self working away. I was able to encounter this work, and this person has accepted to trust me to present their work. And so I think that also curators in institutions and institution in general have to stop commodifying artists and artist narrative, and very much work in collaboration, in tandem. And then why I'm always mesmerized and in awe of artists is they have the ability to, like, scratch the surface, to show us the blind spots, to unearth histories that have been there for centuries in front of us, but we don't see them, or society prevents us from seeing them, or we choose not to see them. And then they put these narratives in front of us. And I would hope that the work we do at the Paraplan leaves visitors, questioning themselves once they've left the exhibition, to think of, if I take the example of Mario's last work again, when Canada opened its door to all of these refugees, and we say, yes, let's sponsor you, let's bring you within our country, have we taken care of them at all levels? Have we thought of people suffering, mental health issues? And do we shy away from caring for them when we see that they're no longer perfect, the perfect new immigrant to the country that has been chosen? And I would hope that in that case, even the attitudes of the bystanders in front of the event that happened, it made me question, would I have stepped in? Would I have intervened? Would I have called the police? And I hope that through the narratives of the artists and the narrative that the institution chooses to present to people, that we expand each of our knowledge. And, as we think of the role of citizens, of voting, I mean, I dearly hope that the impact of the voice of the artist, people take it home with them, and that in their everyday experiences, something from the work of the artist or the narrative that the artist brought speaks to them. And one thing that I am adamant about is that those stories, it doesn't matter if it's a story that started in Germany or Italy or in Canada, we're all humans, and those, at least the works that I try to show, always have it's regardless of where the narrative is embedded, I think it affects all of us in the same way. And I really like what Simone said, that, we will have to think of how we move forward and how we leave something behind and advance to continue to develop our society, because pandemics have always happened before. It's part of the history of humanity. But I would say that the Western world, because of advancements in, medication, water systems, cities, urbanism, we have been protected in the 20th century to have or the later part, to have no major plagues, And so now, because we travel, we take planes, et cetera, we have all been subjected to the same condition of living. And now we have to think that what we have been subjected in the West is what so many communities in the global South have to deal with all the time. So we can no longer act as if this is not about us. Anything that happens now is about all of us.
Yeah, yeah. And Simone, when you think of issues of story and narrative and care and the impact that it has on the communities that you serve, what is the relationship between that? And I'm thinking in particular maybe of your pediatric hospital in Uganda, or the amazing film center that you've built with Mira Nair for young emerging East African filmmakers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, stories and communities are fundamental for us. This is why we always try to set up participatory processes, because places and communities are our commitments. So we have to listen to our commitments. And otherwise, the risk is that we can do the best project, but without being aware of a correct question that places and communities are giving to us. And well, about the project for Mira Nair, how can I say? It starts from the statement. Uganda is an emerging country, and it's growing faster. But you don't have to measure a nation only with the parameters of the gross national product. Also, culture is fundamental for the growing of a nation. This is why she has invested 15 years of her life in this school for young artists, filmmakers, actors, African actors, not only Ugandan. Because she says that if nobody tells our stories, we have to tell our stories, because otherwise nobody will. She says that Africa has an ancient culture of storytellers, but actually they don't have the skills, and they don't have the money, they don't have the schools, and so culture and is fundamental in this point of view. And I think also that is now it is we are in the moment in which we have to set up together story, culture, ethic, economy, and ecology, because I think they definitely have the same roots and the same goals, and hopefully that's what can happen in the future. I hope. Otherwise, we will go again as business as usual, but there is no time anymore for business as usual.
Yeah. So we can have about another 10 minutes. I've had a quick look at the questions from the audience. Many of them you've actually already addressed. So I'd like to ask something a little bit different. You both work in visual media, art and architecture. And so I'm wondering if for you, beauty plays a role in care. Gaëtane, do you want to start?
Yes, I think that, you know, the elegance in which an artist can shock us with, you know, the narrative that they present is for me really, really important. And I would say that, you know, beauty comes in many forms. And I think for me that, you know, there are works that are gut-wrenching, and as you see them, you know, you feel it, you have this physical reaction to them. And the beauty is as much part of being horrified by it, which to me signifies that, you know, we are still thinking, we are still feeling, and we haven't suddenly become completely numb to, you know, human despair or situations of every day. And I think, you know, the art is about this mix of this balancing act between the content and the way you present that content. So of course, and for me, I love works that are multi-layers, right? Layered. So at times the artist is going to attract you with the beautiful image or the beautiful material. And as you dig deeper in what they're talking about, you become more and more horrified or more troubled by the actual subject matter of their work. And I think when artists do that, there's also this way of attraction and repulsion that is constantly at play within their works of art, and then also ensures that works are not seen and it's not literal. You know, you have depth into the work, and you know, when the work of approximation of Mario, which has these beautiful scenes of sunset and dusk in Tierra del Fuego, which is so fabulous, but then he pins them against these images of the factory that treats, I guess, I don't know if it's 1 ton per month of king crab, which, you know, there's the beauty of the space of the technology, but then when you think of it, you're like, oh my God, they're emptying the sea, and this is just one plant, you know? So both things function simultaneously, and as a viewer, I left feeling, you know, gut-wrenching feeling, but the images of the landscape are also at play simultaneously.
Yeah. And Simone, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, well, it's difficult to respond because, the beauty is a big challenge for an architect. How can I say? Beauty is a designer always tries to aspire to reach beauty, but you can never truly reach it. But what is important for me about beauty is this. I have finished my slideshow showing an image, a photograph of the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, built in the early Renaissance by Filippo Brunelleschi. It was a pediatric hospital. It was a hospital for orphans. But it wasn't built as a fabric for repairing bodies. It was built as a wonderful architecture for taking care of souls, or taking care of people. So I think that a good designer has to take care of communities and people through beauty.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are kind of naturally drawn to what makes them feel good, what makes them feel happy, what, you know, also, yes, beauty can have the power to shock. And as Gaëtane was saying, it can be an amazing tool in an artist's arsenal to like suddenly just jolt you or stay with you, and or as a contrast. But yeah, I think it's something that everybody working in visual culture definitely has to grapple with. I think we've reached the end of the Q&A. I would like to just add one thing that one of our speakers or one of our listeners wrote in a comment, just to say to everybody, remember today is George Floyd's birthday. He would have been 47. Yeah, so I'd now like to thank you both, Simone and Gaëtane, very, very much for taking the time to be here today. Really, you've been terrific panelists. Thank you so much for your contributions. And I'd like to also thank Melissa Pohl at the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery for her help, and also Alessandro Ruggera, Gloria Di Folco, and Luisa Trisi at the Italian Cultural Institute, Toronto. A big thank you to my co-curator and co-moderator of this series, Francesca Molteni in Milan. And of course, thank you to you, our audience. So this marks the end of the series, 4 conversations on a changing world between Canada and Italy. And I'll turn things back over to Alessandro Ruggera, Director of the Italian Cultural Institute now, just for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Sascha, and thank you very, very much, Simone and Gaëtane. It has been really terrific. I think we have. I have to say personally, I'm extremely happy. As you know, probably know, I'm about to end my term here in Toronto. It's been a long journey, 5 years of organizing different activities, and I think this series of conversation is really something that it will stay personally, and I will keep as a memory. And I think it has been an opportunity. And for this, I really have to thank both Sascha Hastings and Francesca Molteni and all the speakers. There's been an opportunity to reflect really and to go to the very core of what means to work as a culture operator, as someone that has to work in culture in a specific environment, in a specific moment. In creating, and for me, I mean, as leading the Italian Cultural Institute, is also all about creating connections and putting together Italy, Italian culture in general, if something as Italian culture really exists. I mean, if we can define culture as on a national base, which I sometimes doubt, I usually doubt. In general, I doubt it's possible to define it this way, but I mean, it's very important to create this boundary. And I think this series of conversations has been, as I was saying, the opportunity to really go deeper and to put together different approaches, and also to react to a very specific moment that was the pandemic. And not only the pandemic, as Gaëtane really pointed out, the pandemic and a lot of different social themes and issues such as inclusion, and that has been brought up by Black Lives Matter. How do we deal with all these social issues and contemporary issues on a cultural level? I hope, and I think I'm optimistic, we haven't provided answers. There's probably no answers to offer, but we have provided opportunity for somehow reflecting more, and as we say, some food for thought on this very important topic that at the end of the day, it really touches all very, very deeply. And yeah, I'm glad we have concluded with this panel about care and the contribution of Simone. Simone was in Toronto a couple of years ago as a host of the Istituto for the Italian Design Day in very different conditions. But yeah, very different conditions, but the message stayed the same, and it's a very relevant message. So once again, thank you to all of you. Thank you to all the staff of the Istituto, to Gloria, the Folco in this case that is dealing with all the technical aspects, and to Luisa Trisi that has helped us for reaching out to the media, and to all the listeners and all the community of the Istituto, the power plant, and also, I would say, for TAMassociati and friends. So thank you. Take care. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.